So could you tell us about your published work, and then we can talk about your work in progress?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of, I do creative writing and then I also do article writing. So the article writing was sort of happening for a while I was still in the military. And so I was starting to write for Chatelaine. I was writing a blog about being a woman in the military, and then it turned into being part of some military related anthologies. So I'm in about 6 anthologies, I think, Canada wide. And then
Can we go back to the how long were you in the military, and
yeah.
let's cover some of the basics of the background there.
Which is definitely relevant to
Yes.
my book. So I joined the military when I was 18, and right after 9/11 happened. And I joined the military while I was going to school. So I got my degree, and then in the summers I did my training. So I did 8 years, and I got medically released in 2011 for after an injury that just wouldn't heal. I broke my leg and it wouldn't heal properly. So that's what I ended up doing. I wrote a book about my experiences as a woman in the military. It's a nonfiction memoir, and mostly addresses a lot of the harassment that I faced. So it's called Girls Need Not Apply: Field Notes from the Forces.
And I'm going to do this. Oh, look at that.
No one ever believes it's me, actually, on the cover. And recently I've mostly had blonde hair, so no one ever believes it's me on the cover. And it's been a journey, for sure.
Now, how was that received in the military community? Did you get support, or was it mainly just, okay. I have an impression, it may be wrong, that the military and the police are not very fast forward moving organizations. That was as tactful as I can be. Sorry.
I appreciated the tact. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Fiona.
And so putting something like your experiences out there on paper in black and white for a much broader community than the military, how did that fly?
I was quite nervous, actually. My husband's still in the military, so and his name's in it. So I was also nervous about how that would affect either his career or, I mean, there's nothing they can do to me, but certainly the military is also my community that I love. I still love the forces and what we stand for. So I was really nervous about putting it out there. But I called the public affairs officer, which is sort of a necessary step for my husband called her and said, listen, my wife's putting out this book, kind of nerve-wracking about it, and she asked to speak to me. And I was thinking, oh gosh, this is going to go haywire. And she asked me to come speak on the base for International Women's Day. And since I've traveled to a bunch of different bases to talk about harassment, I feel like that's a really big sign of change. That's a sign of progress. That's saying, yeah, we see there's a problem. What can we do about it? Let's talk to people who know it, who have lived it. I think there's a lot to be said. The barrier is broken down a little bit for people when they see, I know their world. I get it. It's not that I want to pretend that everything's fine. And it's also not that I want to be a victim the whole time. But where there's problems, there has to be change. And so it's actually been wonderfully positive. If I go a day without getting an email from someone who says, oh, I was living this too, or now I know how to be a better ally to women, or things like that, it's been beautiful. So I thought I would get a lot more hate than I have.
I am so happy to hear that. I really am. It's wow.
Yeah.
So how long ago was that published, and what are you working on now?
It just came out. It was just my book's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, book. August 20th. And so just came out last year. And I have just loved every step of the process. I love touring. I love chatting with people. I love book clubs. I love the editing. I love all of it. And the next one comes out it's looking like April or May 2022, but spring 2022.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you love all of it. Okay, I have to say that of all the authors we're talking to, that I've talked to, you've got to be the first one who says you love all of it.
I know. I think it comes from, I was in the military and I always wanted to be a writer. So my undergraduate degree was in was in writing. And certainly in the military, that got me a lot of.
Yeah, I can imagine.
My master's degree is in creative writing. My PhD is in creative writing. And so this is like the thing I have always loved and wanted. I think I wanted it for such a long time. And the military didn't make a ton of room for that creativity. Not necessarily their fault either. I was just busy. And so now I'm living what I always wanted. I never want to be ungrateful for that dream. And so, but I think I also just, I'm very much a mix between extrovert and introvert. I like to be alone. I don't mind being alone, but I also really love people. And so I feel like writing gives you that great mix.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think many writers struggle with that mix. If they're a true introvert, they hate
Yeah.
they hate the the marketing and the PR stuff. And some people, when you get stuck in that editing hell, I know some writers who have edited for 3 and 4 years. They I mean, it just becomes yeah. Yeah.
And memoir is hard to, my next book's memoir too. And this book was memoir, and they're not dealing with light themes. They're heavy, difficult subjects. And so it can be hard to have to sit with your really difficult memories and then excavate that onto a page. It's torturous. It's very difficult. I spend a lot of writing days crying, but it's also really beautiful and wonderful. And I love that process. And it's therapy that I give myself without having to pay for.
That was actually one of the questions as I was going through our questions. That was one of the ones that I had as a follow-up was how do you, because we're going to talk about your next work in progress, but I know that they're both memoirs, and I know that they're both these emotional and very fraught relationships and complex issues. And so I was going to ask you about self-care, and how do you keep it from re-hurting and re-traumatizing when you're really putting difficult stuff down on the page?
Yeah. So it feels like probably a good time to bring up the second book because it would be relevant to this. So my
second book.
Yeah, my next book is called Still I Cannot Save You. It's about my sister who died just 2 years ago. And actually, Maclean and Stewart, who's my publisher, published a copy of my first book just for her, had it bound professionally and everything for her so she could have it before she died, which was lovely. And so it's about that relationship. My sister was an addict for many years. So of course I'm touching on addiction. I'm touching on mental health, death, grief, and also abuse. My sister was very much abused in her relationship. So I'm not dealing with easy things, and they're very hard memories. And then of course with my first book, sexual harassment, I'm talking about rapes of friends. I'm talking about watching people commit suicide. I'm talking about PTSD. I'm talking about hard things. So I very much, when I left the military, slipped into a pretty deep depression. And so I did learn very quickly in my writing career how necessary self-care was. So I journal a lot, where I can just word vomit on the page, where I'm not having to cultivate a narrative of some kind. I'm in therapy, weekly or bi-weekly, depending on what's going on at the time. I'm on medication because I have depression. I do a lot of mindfulness practice. I go for walks. I think it's about understanding your own limitations between, is this uncomfortable just because it's conflict and that's hard to open up about? Or is this hard because it's just gone too far and I need to step back from it? And when I recognize that in myself, that's when I step back and I return to it another day. But it's definitely important to take that time and to find healthy ways to cope. Mostly for me, it's spending time with loved ones, my dog, and those cups of tea and reading something different. So sometimes I'll slip to fictions or poetry and something fun and playful to remind me why I love what I do.
That's awesome. I also have a dog. Dogs are the most mindful beings on the planet. I just adore that about them. So what is on your book bedside table right now, or assuming, what is on your, what is your immediate go-to read for right now?
So I I keep two going at the same time. So because I've been doing my PhD, and it's very much looking at grief, I've been reading a lot of books about dying. So I'm like, I'm ready for that to be over. Death, dying, suffering, it's getting a little depressing. So I started really getting into alternating. I love thrillers. So I love them. So that's what I like to read at night. And then I have a book that I have going during the day. Right now, I'm reading A Queer Love Story. It's a collection of letters between Jane Rule and Rob Bebu. I could be pronouncing that right, Bebu or Beboat. It's a collection of letters where they discuss everything from AIDS to gay representation in the media to human rights issues. And so I usually have a heavier book that I read during the day and morning, and then murder at night. That's probably...
Yeah, that's much lighter, for
yeah,
sure.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah, especially when it's dark and you're alone in a room. I think it's a perfect choice.
Hot roast the dog. He will save me. Yeah.
Yeah, my dogs would stand behind me and say, "Go, Mom, go. We're right behind you." It will make a lot of noise. So sorry, we have totally gone off. This always happens to me. I'm so sorry. I'm like the world's worst interviewer. I'm like, oh, rabbit. Here's a really cool rabbit hole. Anyway.
I'm with it, and they all feel relevant. So
they do.
Yeah.
So now that you're a writer, does that mean your next book's going to have Dr. Kelly S. Thompson on it?
Ooh, it will.
That's very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what do you wish you had known? So when you had, when you were in the military and you had these grand dreams of being a writer, and then you're living this life, which isn't bad, and you're doing really well, but what do you wish you had known, or that somebody had told you that you were like, wow, that was different?
I wish I had known to read more widely. In terms of, I had a very narrow scope of what I enjoyed, and it was probably still thrillers, but also I didn't really read a lot of literary fiction. I didn't read nonfiction at all, which is funny because now that's what I write. I didn't read poetry. I didn't purposely seek out books by Indigenous writers, by trans writers, by writers of color. Now I do, and I encourage other people to, because I feel like our job as writers is to reflect humanity on the page in some sense or another. You can't do that if your view of what humanity is very narrow. And the military has such a specific world. It's certainly there's diversity, but there is it has the same mentality because that's what we're trained to have. So I think I wish I had known to read more widely, to understand alternate experiences to my own, to make me a better person, a more educated person, but also the more widely you read, the more you're sparked in all these different parts of your brain, I think. So I wish I had known that, and I wish I had known how much of it is persistence as opposed to just talent. I used to think very much like, everyone has some sort of writing talent, and I really believe writing can also be taught. I'm definitely a better writer for the education I've gone through than I was when I started. But I wish I had known that how much of it is really just, I will not give up, and I will be irritating till the dawn of time until I make it happen for myself. And you kind of have to have that attitude because it's a world in which you're shot down an awful lot. So yeah, those things.
I love that answer. So when you talk about, when did you come to this epiphany about reading widely and reading variously? Is that the right word? But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think certainly I left the military, I was 27, and I started my master's degree right away. And it was the first time I was back into a community of really sort of left-wing thinking, whereas of course I'd been in the military for a long time, that I'm not going to say is right-wing thinking necessarily, but it's a very different mentality where the arts is not a focus. And so I started to really open up a lot more to making room for other people's knowledge and experience. As an officer in the military, what I say goes, and it's nice to have what you say not always go. Sometimes it's about taking in what other people are doing. So before I applied to that program, I started reading a lot more than I had. And I realized I also wasn't reading a lot and writing a lot because I wasn't happy. And now I want to read a little bit of everything. So certainly during my master's degree, I started, maybe 10 years ago. And then of course I started to teach. So I was teaching creative writing at Trent University, and our classrooms are full of diversity. What are we if we're not encouraging everyone to share each other's experience? That's what a book is about, creating that resonance. And so it's really important for students to feel and see themselves reflected on the page. When I think about why I wrote my book, about women in the military, I thought so much of that healing comes from seeing your own experience reflected somewhere. And we didn't have a lot of stories from female veterans. What about that for so many other people with different experiences? How validating is it to see yourself reflected somewhere? I think that's valuable and not to be forgotten.
I think it's priceless.
Yes.
It's
Well, you're part of Fold.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, I remember, and just when I started to see female protagonists, because so many of the books we get are by men with male protagonists, and even just seeing a woman or a girl on the page was moments for me where I'm like, wow, I'm here. And I assume that that's true for everybody. And beyond that, I think when we do this, we it's not just about diversity, but it's about universality. We get to see, instead of people are packaged by their skin color or their sexuality, we get to see much more of, well, you know what, we are, in many ways, it's not the same experience, but we have similar needs. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want to know that our place on this planet was valued and made a difference. And I think that when we engage in diverse voices, we get to see our similarities as well as our differences.
And that was the thing too, was I had left the military, and it's not a place that encourages, if you're disabled, if you're injured, like I was, you're medically released. People hide their mental health problems because they're scared of losing their jobs. And so I was used to really keeping that quiet. And then suddenly it was like, oh, people are sharing these stories. How exciting. And so I started reading about disability because I was experiencing it, both physically and mentally. I started reading about people who were suffering mentally but overcame it, or they didn't. And there was also beauty in those stories too. I needed to feel like I belonged when I had just lost the community I thought I had belonged to. And I think it's sad that it took me to get to that point to start seeking that out. What if we started doing that sooner? I like the idea of that.
I know one of the things when we talk in the Fold, and I mean, we have regular virtual meetings these days, but the issue of disability, I mean, physical disabilities, I mean, that's real, and of course, like, that's one of our focuses. But we talk about that neurodiversity and mental health disabilities or mental health issues, and that's a lot. I mean, it's my daughter has ADHD, and these invisible disabilities are they're not tangible, and they're even less talked about.
Yes.
And it's that's work that we want to continue to do, because it's and it affects way more people than we talk about and we allow it to affect. And so these ongoing conversations are so important for all of us.
Exactly.
Wow. All right. So way off topic. I think if you could switch with any other writer, dead or living, for a day, who would you like to be?
I really feel like it would be someone who's had a lot of commercial success, as opposed to more of a, we really separate in the literary world, literary versus commercial, which I always find very unfortunate. I like all kinds of writing, and I think every kind of writing has an audience. So I would really like to switch with someone who'd had quite high commercial success. Maybe their book was turned into a TV series or something along those lines, so that we could sort of play off one another and try to examine those different things that make our work unique and creative. I think I'd really like to go back to some of the first women in particular who were really starting to break a lot of boundaries. You know, when we look at Shelley, you know, writing Frankenstein, what was it like to be breaking those kinds of barriers back then? It feels very interesting to me.
I just want to, for people who get to the end of this video, and I hope they meander with us through this conversation, you are not a Toronto author. Do you want to say where you're from? And of course, the benefit of COVID times is that you could be an anywhere in Canada author.
Yes.
Where are you based?
And I sort of am an anywhere in Canada author because we're military and we move all the time. I say we're sort of like homeless. We're currently in North Bay until next summer when we're posted again, and we have no idea where we're headed in particular.
Oh, okay.
We've been given several options, but we're just like crossing our fingers and knocking on wood right now. So right now, North Bay, but last week Skyped into to a book club in Nova Scotia, in Lunenburg, and I've Skyped into ones in BC. So, and I've lived in all these places, so I'm one of you wherever you are.
Oh, that's awesome. So you are a near north-based author right now.
Yeah.
More information pending.
Yeah, always pending and updating. Yeah.
Well, I guess the good thing about writing is you can do it anywhere.
Truly. And it's nice because it means, you know, I used to look at my mom, who was a nurse, and every time my parents moved, because both my husband and I grew up in military families, every time my parents moved, my mom lost her job, lost her seniority. And it is a life, you know, that you sign up for. But it's nice that I don't have any resentment because I don't lose my job when I go. I don't feel like my value is less, my job worth is less than his. And so that's a wonderful thing. And if anything, every time we go somewhere new, I meet new people, I explore new places. That always makes you a better, wiser person.
I'd like to kind of end, if I may, with how you and I have got a rather unfortunate connection too. And that is sarcoma. And I know that is how you actually wound up losing your sister.
Yeah.
Was it leiomyosarcoma?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And I have an insanely rare sarcoma called epithelioid hemangioendothelioma, which took me 6 months post-diagnosis to actually say, and another 6 months to know how to spell. So I guess one of the things I wanted to put out there as our part of our interview is that not all cancers, as we know, get equal treatment. And when we talk about mental health and things being put away into corners and not really dealt with, sarcoma is that in the cancer world. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate you reaching out to me, and the Sarcoma Foundation of Canada does great work. And
you did a fundraiser.
I do. I pretty much do them all the time, ongoing in different ways. But just getting the word out there about sarcomas and how rare we are and how limited the treatments are and how there's much less success because there's less research, including your beloved sister dying. And I guess I just wanted to let people know that.
And they say that the survival rates haven't changed since the cancer was found. It's still the same survival rate, which is quite low. And so for that reason, and because it's rare, and you have one of the rarest of the already rare cancers, you're right, the funding doesn't go there because it's not seen to impact as many people. And it's funny that it's not until you really deal with a lot of cancer that you start to realize the politics behind a lot of it, which is slightly depressing. Not slightly, it's very depressing. But I also want to thank you. You're a champion of your illness. And that's a gift.
I don't know if it's a gift so much as a position I've been forced into, but I guess.
I mean, you're a gift. I didn't mean you've received a gift, certainly.
No, I understood that.
Yeah. Gosh.
I guess, yeah. So as we talk about these conversations, people, anybody who watches this, hey, the big cancer societies, they don't listen to us small and rare diseases, and our survival rates haven't changed, and cancer shouldn't be a popularity contest. That's my little soapbox. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.